I wanted to talk about Diablo 4 for a while now, and I finally found the time. Here is my review of Diablo 4. Is Diablo 4 addictive? Yes. Is it a good game? Of course it is, but doesn't it have any flaws? Sadly, it does. Many of them. Let's look at why Diablo 4 is both good and bad successor of Diablo 3. Without further ado, let's go. By the way, this is a spoiler-free review. When Diablo 3 released in 2012, it was far from perfect game. It looked too colorful and cartoony for Diablo universe, had the infamous auction house, basically lacked any endgame and missed a lot of quality of life features. Only with release of couple of major patches and Reaper of Souls expansion, Diablo 3 became the game that we have known for the last couple of years. I remember that I started to enjoy Diablo 3 much more when it got Paragon levels, seasons, adventure mode, rifts and armory. Of course, with time the formula of Diablo 3 seasons started to get tiring, as Blizzard rarely made each season truly special. That being said, the devs really managed to make Diablo 3 much greater game than it originally was. Of course, when Blizzard revealed that Diablo 4 was in the making, I knew I had to play it. So I did. Now that I spent in it countless hours and leveled my character to level 72, I can say with confidence that Diablo 4 is a really great game, but unfortunately Blizzard made with it a lot of the same mistakes that it did with Diablo 3. Believe me, there are reasons why this game is scored far from perfectly by players on Metacritic, although not all of the reviews have merit. Of course, we need to look at these reasons from up close, but let's start with the things that I love in Diablo 4. Blizzard seriously nailed it when it comes to graphics and aesthetics in Diablo 4. The game is dark, gory and doesn't shy away from showing blood. Some levels were designed specifically to induce a feeling of disgust in players. In particular, I appreciate Diablo 4's lighting. It perfectly highlights the character of each area and dungeon in the game. Pun not intended. Diablo 4 has also very detailed textures. I don't think there is a better looking hack and slash game. During gameplay you can zoom in on your character, and when you do that, nothing is pixelated or blurry. What's important, Diablo 4 feels like a Diablo game. That's thanks to many elements including aesthetics and gameplay, but also sound design and music. Combat itself is very dynamic and satisfying, but as I played only Rogue so far and Witch during the beta, I can only speak for these classes. The game has very satisfying sound effects, many of which we heard in earlier Diablo installments, like sound of using healing wells. Music is also reminiscent of those older installments. Of course, music in every area of the game is different. For example, songs used in Kyrgyzstan have that Arabic note, while songs we can hear in Skosglen remind me a little bit of Tristram. Also, the voice acting here deserves praise. It's really top-notch whether we are talking about main characters or random NPCs. Most people could probably listen to Ralph Ineson's voice, who voiced Lorath, for hours.
If you're going to trespass into my home, rifle through my things, then at least have the decency to join me for supper.
Thanks to the voice actors, plentiness of side quests, and the fact that the NPCs sometimes randomly talk to each other, the world of the game feels alive. It's worth noting that this world is pretty big, and although this time we can visit only one big part of Sanctuary instead of smaller bits scattered around, every area is different. We start the game at fractured peaks covered in snow, then we get to green mountainous Skosglen, and later on we visit deserts and swamps. I also need to say that in the game you can visit both large cities that have every type of merchant and small towns or villages with only some types of merchants. Sadly, not everything in large cities is put in one place, or at least relatively close to each other. In a lot of them, after we use services on one NPC, we have to run to opposite side of the city to use services of another NPC. The bad thing is that since the world is big and complicated, default's minimap is too zoomed in and too small. I found myself opening the map very often, interrupting my gameplay. I am not a big fan of overlay maps, but I feel many players would love to have it. It's important to remember that D3 didn't have overlay map that let you still play while open, but world in D3 was broken into smaller segments, so it wasn't needed as much. There are a lot of waystones in D4, but aside from them we can use a mount to faster traverse the game's world. Sadly, mount mechanics need some work. First of all, the mount doesn't go the fastest it can when we speed it up if our mouse cursor is too close to it. Second of all, the mount can stumble on the stupidest things and sometimes it jumps through precipices no problem, while sometimes it just won't for no reason. Third of all, there is an annoying cooldown for using the mount if we dismount it outside of a city, which is longer if we were thrown off the horse by a mob. Sometimes our rides are also interrupted by skeletons that set up walls. These walls often need to be destroyed until we can go further. Only one area in Diablo 4's open world we visited in previous games. That being said, with this installment, Blizzard didn't introduce into the Diablo world many new monster and enemy types, which I see as a giant missed opportunity. We mainly fight Khazra, demons, more demons, skeletons, ghouls, spiders and cultists. Only sometimes we encounter werewolves, drowned vampires and Inangari. Besides, despite the fact that there are more than 100 dungeons in this game, we fight in them only little more than 20 boss types. But what bothers me the most in case of enemies in this game is the fact that even normal mobs can chain CC and one-shot you within fraction of a second. This is the opposite of fun. Dungeons in Diablo 4 can have varying objectives, but a lot of them we have to complete many times, just in different order. Some objectives are okay, but some, like having to kill all enemies in given area for 100th time, can get tedious fast. Some normal dungeons we can transform to a nightmare dungeons with special sigils that need to be looted or crafted. Nightmare dungeons have tiers defining their difficulty and special affixes. Doing nightmare dungeons is mostly fun, but having to run to dungeons entrance every time to start it gets boring fast. Thankfully, Blizzard already released an update that lets us finally teleport to nightmare dungeons. Just as dungeon objectives, dungeon affixes can be great or just annoying, like affix that makes you lose primary resource every time distant enemy hits you. Moreover, I wish Blizzard would increase mob density in the dungeons instead of nerfing dungeons that have more mobs and more elites than others. Also, nightmare dungeon loot is usually shockingly disappointing. Doing higher tier dungeon doesn't always come with better rewards. Okay, let's go back to the matter of dungeons later. Now let's talk about the beginning of the game. So a completely new thing in Diablo 4 is the ability to customize our character. We can not only choose their gender, but also change their hair and eye color, hairstyle, make him or her have tattoos and jewelry. I love all of that, but really I hope that later in the game we will get even more customization options. Also, why do blonde hair in so many games have to look green? Come on. Maybe in Diablo 5 Blizzard will also let us change body types of characters. I understand that developers made Druid look straight up obese for diversity, but I think that all body types should be available for all classes. I am skinny and therefore I prefer playing skinny characters or at least characters close to my body type. When we start the game and create first character, we can choose to see hints explaining some game systems and mechanics. But you should know that once you read a hint regarding, for example, crafting sigils, you will never see it again. There is no way to access it again anywhere in the game. This may be troublesome for new players. Personally, when I didn't remember something, I looked it up on the internet, and I didn't have to do it often. After we create the first character, our main goal is to complete the story campaign. The story revolves, of course, around Lilith, who was released from the Void. During the campaign we encounter some characters from Diablo 3, but at least one important character is weirdly absent. But is the story good? Well, it is a little bit better than Diablo 3's story, but to be honest, it is not thrilling. It didn't grab me by the heart, it didn't make me cry, it didn't shock me in any way. What's more, for me, some newly introduced characters didn't fit well into that story. I definitely wouldn't buy D4 solely for completing the campaign. The best parts of the campaign were definitely the character of Lilith and a juicy cinematic we got to see close to the end. It may be the best cinematic Blizzard has made so far. During and after the campaign we can also do a lot of side quests, which are fully voice acted. A lot of these are boring fetch quests, but at least some quest chains are actually better than the campaign itself. What I love is that they enrich the world of the game, tell interesting stories, and sometimes continue the stories of characters we met earlier in a meaningful way. Of course, Diablo IV offers multiple levels of progression during gameplay. We can progress not only the campaign and side quests, but also level our character, gain regional renown to unlock special bonuses, get better and better gear, and more. Max character level in Diablo IV is level 100, but only levels 150 are technically base levels, and the rest are Paragon levels. At level 50 we unlock Paragon boards, and after that, instead of classic skill points, we get only Paragon points. Skill tree in Diablo IV isn't really extensive and complicated, and to me that's completely fine, aside from the fact that some skills could be more customizable. 2 variations of given skill is too little. I like that Blizzard's devs didn't go the path of exile road because I think PoE skill trees are simply ridiculous. That being said, the layout of the skill tree in D4 could be a little more readable. I love this concept that someone shared on Reddit. As a side note, I also don't get why Diablo 4 has no loadouts, which were part of Diablo 3. Because of that, it's not possible to quickly switch between builds in the game or even save the builds that we want to test out. The idea of Paragon boards is good, that's because you can rotate the boards and join them almost however you wish. On the other hand, I think that Paragon boards should have more meaningful nodes. Right now, most of the nodes give simply +5 of stats like dexterity, strength, etc. The biggest problem with level progression is the fact that after level 50 the XP gain is really slow. If I am going to play only solo, it will probably take me at least another 3 weeks to grind to level 100. If I am going to play at least in party of 2, I'll be getting 10% more XP. Yes, level grind in D2 was way worse. But let's be honest, D2 is a 20 years old game. Slow leveling probably means that I will play another character only when Season 1 will begin. I don't even know if I want to level my current character to level 100, it just doesn't sound exciting. If you completed a campaign on one character, you can skip it on other characters. On that other characters you will have access to all the legendary aspects unlocked on the first character, waypoints in major cities and all the buffs from discovered Altars of Lilith, but the map will be undiscovered. Thankfully, you will have to farm renown only for gold bonuses, if you want to. All the other area unlock bonuses will be available to you from the get-go. When it comes to progression, I saw that a lot of players didn't like the fact that Diablo 4 has level scaling. I understand where that dislike is coming from. Scaling may make your character feel weaker when getting new levels instead of stronger. But I didn't really have that problem because I was constantly able to get better and better gear and unlock nice upgrades on Paragon boards. Besides, scaling has an important benefit. Thanks to it, all areas in the world feel relevant in the endgame. Like in D3 in Diablo 4, we can later unlock additional gameplay difficulties. We can start on World Tier 1 or 2, and when we feel strong enough we can complete capstone dungeons to unlock tiers 3 and 4. Of course, on higher difficulties we can get more XP, more gold and better items, but mobs don't just have more health and don't just deal more damage. They are also more intelligent. Tier 3 and 4 also unlock access to events called Helltides, which let us gather materials needed for final item upgrades and rerolling item affixes. Helltides and Nightmare Dungeons aren't the only endgame activities to do. We can also participate in so-called Legion events, kill world bosses, do PvP for some cosmetic rewards, and complete special quests for Tree of Whispers. Another problems a lot of players have with the game are that it is online only and that it forces you to see other players. The rants about the online part I don't get. Diablo 3 was online only too. Besides, anyone who can afford a PC or console good enough to play D4 can also afford internet connection. The seeing other players part bothers me too. On one hand, there is no way to avoid meeting other players in cities and in open world. On the other hand, there is no system that would let you form parties with random players for dungeons. There's not even a global chat, so you can basically form parties only with your friends or with players standing directly next to you. All in all, D4 feels a little bit like a forced MMO, but without the most important MMO systems. Personally, I think that Diablo 4's biggest problem is its itemization. Diablo 4's developers clearly wanted to make this game's itemization more interesting than itemization in Diablo 3. But I think in this regard, they kind of missed the mark. In D4 we can loot normal, magic, rare, legendary and unique items. Legendaries in the game drop less often than in D3 and it's a good thing, because they still drop pretty often. Uniques drop very rarely and have fixed affixes. To compensate for that a little bit, as I mentioned before, we can create legendaries from rares, using aspects, which are legendary powers that we got as rewards from dungeons or extracted from other legendaries. What's important aspects we got from completing dungeons are in special aspect menu and we can use them as much as we want, while aspects extracted from items are one-time use only and we have to store them in inventory or our stash. Thankfully, there is a dedicated aspect tab in inventory. The same cannot be said about gems, but Blizzard already said that the gems will be transferred to Materials tab in the future. Sadly, the legendary powers seem overcomplicated. There are a lot of powers that have long descriptions and partly overlap. Especially at the beginning, it's easy to get lost while trying to grasp them. The stash doesn't make things easier because it has no filtering system or search engine. It's also way too small. Because of the lack of search engine, every time I go to stash with new legendaries, I have to manually check if I already have items with given powers, item by item. It's also hard to evaluate legendaries collection visually because legendaries with vastly different powers often share their looks. In Diablo 3, each legendary was different from every other item, so it was easier to get your head around its itemization. What some people forget to mention is that, at least for now, there are no sets in the game. That broadens build diversity a little, but there are also a lot of things that at the same time narrow build diversity. One of those things are affixes. In D4, Blizzard introduced a lot of affixes that are situational. We don't just have bonuses to critical damage, critical hit chance and so on. We also have, for example, bonuses to damage to targets that are close, damage to targets that are far away, damage to immobilized targets, damage to stunned targets, and damage to vulnerable targets. Right now, these affixes are not balanced. Vulnerable feels like a must for most, if not all of the classes, which makes builds that take that affix into account much stronger than others. The situational aspect of all these affixes makes it also a little bit harder to feel just how strong our character is. Okay, Blizzard assured before Diablo 4's release that it won't be pay to win. So did Blizzard keep its promise? Well, you can argue if race to 1000 hardcore level 100 characters was fair, since buyers of Digital Deluxe and Ultimate editions of the game got to play it earlier. But at least as of now, there is no way to make your D4 character more powerful with real world money. The game has a special currency buyable with real money, but it can only be used to buy cosmetics in the shop. We will see if the Battle Pass also won't be pay to win when Season 1 will start. I also have to praise the game's performance. I already played D4 for several dozen hours, and when I encountered some bugs, they were really minor. There were also no lags and no server problems, except for one day when I played. Thanks to great optimization and DLSS, the game runs very smoothly, at least on my PC. I think that that's all that I have to say about Diablo 4 for now. As you just learned, Diablo 4 is a game with many flaws, from poor itemization and lack of quality of life features to balance issues. Besides, although it's fun for many hours, after level 70 it starts to get boring and feeling like a chore. In many ways, Diablo 4 just isn't as satisfying as Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. If you loved past Diablo games, I think that you will have a lot of fun in Diablo 4, at least up to a point, even if it bothers you that it's online only and has MMO elements. If you are more of Path of Exile fan, you shouldn't expect D4 to be like PoE, because it never will be. There is hope that Diablo 4 will become better and better with every patch, and that's because Blizzard devs are already working on important changes and even implemented some. Of course, nowadays it's best not to have any expectations of Blizzard, but I think that even now Diablo 4 is worth its price. Thanks for watching, bye bye!